Hello, I'm Anton. Welcome to episode 5 of the Idea Fab Lab podcast. Today I'm here with Kevin Elgan, the founder of Chatterbox. Kevin, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's great to have you. We've actually just been talking for quite some time, so I'm going to pretend for the sake of the viewers that I don't know anything about you.
I don't know anything either.
Yeah. I thought maybe what would be good for people who aren't familiar with you to sort of start at the beginning, which is where are you from and how did you start creating things?
Yeah, that's interesting. Where to start? I would probably say I was born in LA,
Okay.
but I really grew up in New York.
Interesting.
And that kind of started this whole kind of weird thing where I always felt like I was a bi-coastal mutt.
Right.
My family is really from Santa Barbara, so it was like small beach town, Carpinteria, really.
Sure.
If you're familiar with like Southern California, and amazing place. But then when I was 8, my dad got a big job with he worked for a magazine called Windows and OS2 magazine, and
Okay.
this is like we're talking 91 at this point, and it was at the very beginning of this whole computer, like personal computer revolution,
Right.
and the internet and all of that stuff. And they were purchased by a company out east, and so we ended up moving, and we transplanted the entire family to Long Island, New York,
Okay.
where the other company was based.
Right.
And over there, it was really kind of this interesting thing where I never felt like I fit in. But then I grew up there, and I learned to speak like New Yorkers.
Right.
But they never accepted me. And then so when I would come back to California, my family would say, no, you talk like a New Yorker. And then I'd
Right.
be in New York and they'd be like, no, you speak like a California, surfer, person.
Right.
And so it kind of set the stage for me kind of not ever fitting in. And that was really kind of the one of the first core kind of principles of my life where I never wanted to fit in. It was actually kind of cool to be new and be doing different things. But that was actually my first foray into technology as a byproduct of my dad, who ran Windows Mag,
Okay.
which was, a top 2 magazine during the 90s.
Okay.
And so
Nice.
I always had access to lots of really fun toys.
Yeah, I bet. Okay. So you moved to Long Island when you were 8.
Mhm.
How long were you in Long Island? Because obviously you're not in Long Island now,
Right,
so you
exactly,
must have
yeah.
left at some point.
Yeah, no. So I was there until my senior year.
Okay.
My parents left previously. I stayed in New York, and
Okay.
then I was like, I'm going away for university, and it would be nice to live with my family for one more year.
Right.
And so they moved at the beginning of my junior year. So I spent
Okay.
that junior year in New York. So I moved back to Los Gatos actually.
Oh, okay.
And this was, the .com rush. My dad came out here. He was, working for a company. It was like a online publishing company.
Okay.
And so I started out here, and I actually spent a lot of time in Santa Cruz
Okay.
during
Nice.
that time because, senior year, you don't know anybody in school. I love surfing, so
Sure.
I just spent all my time surfing.
Right.
And made my friends there. So
Okay.
but yeah, and then I actually ended up moving back to New York to graduate high school.
Okay. So let me make sure I have this right. So it's the beginning of junior year, your parents moved to Los Gatos.
That's right.
Then in your senior year, you also come to Los Gatos for a while and then go back
For a couple months.
for a couple months
For a couple months.
and then go back
And
to
then I went
graduate.
back. Yes.
Okay. And so that's at this point you've gotten into surfing. You've gotten to know Santa Cruz a little bit more.
Oh yeah. Pleasure Point was my spot.
Yeah, that's, I mean, still a good spot. Okay, so then what happens next? Do you start going to a university or do you come back to
Yeah.
California?
So I graduated from high school in New York, and I went to the U.S. Naval Academy in
Okay.
Annapolis, Maryland.
Okay.
So it's like everybody knows West Point, which is Army. This is the Academy for the Navy.
Okay. So, and how long were you there for?
I was there
The
2 years.
full time? 2 years?
Yeah, and
Okay.
it's at the end of 2 years you have this option for that are called the 2-for-7 papers.
Okay.
You sign these papers for 2 more years of school for the next 7 years of your life, because you have to actually give 5 years of service afterwards.
Right.
But again, I being the kind of person who never really fit in, it was kind of a rough awakening to go to the Naval Academy, where I loved certain aspects of it, but to fall in line and just do everything like everybody else does is just counter to my nature.
I definitely understand. Actually, it's funny. I thought about going to West Point
Really?
when I graduated, but I was 16 when I graduated high school, and you needed to be 17 to apply.
Oh, wow.
So I ended up not applying and just moved on.
That's
and
wild.
paths diverged, and I never went
Isn't that
back
crazy?
to look into it again.
That's really interesting.
Yeah. Okay. So 2 years at the U.S. Naval Academy.
Mm-hmm.
You say, I'm not doing the 2-for-7 papers. Don't fit in with this whole thing.
Ironically enough, at the Naval Academy, I was a computer science major.
Okay.
Learning C++, doing all kinds of stuff. And all of that came easy to me.
Sure.
And I found really exciting. But at the same time, I'm not a coder. Like,
Right.
it's like I like people. I like interacting with people.
Right.
So I left. I did an internship. It was like a software developer internship upon leaving. And that was a really kind of eye-opening experience. We were like building a learning application based on, I laugh about it now, but based on the Palm Pilot.
Oh, yeah.
And
I remember
the whole
those.
idea is that, I graduated high school in 2001. And 5 days after graduating, went to the U.S. Naval Academy. A couple months after that, 9/11 happened. And I'm from New York. And so that
Right.
kind of changed everything.
Right.
And then realized that, it wasn't kind of the right thing. But then leaving the academy, I had this internship opportunity. And it was building a learning application for soldiers being deployed overseas. And so
Gotcha.
the scenario was that, you have people who are being deployed to an Arabic speaking region, like Iraq, or Iraq really is what we were designing for.
Right.
And having a language barrier is such a stressful situation that can, lead to escalation very easily.
Yeah.
And so this internship was actually pretty interesting. And we created kind of a prototype application and got into kind of the whole aspect of how, like, what's the best way to learn, what's the fastest way to learn. It's all based on research from the Dallas, the Learning Lab in Dallas, Texas.
Okay.
And so it was based on research, and it had some, I would say mild success.
Okay.
But
Good.
it really opened my eyes to the idea of how do you take an idea and make something out of it.
Okay. And you said earlier that, in your own words, you're not a coder.
No.
Was this internship the first time that you sort of felt like you could use that to actually make something rather than just sort of the ephemeral, I do coding because it's school?
So I learned BASIC on my own. I taught myself BASIC,
Sure.
When I was 10 or something like that. And
Is that from your dad's magazines or something like that?
it was
laying
just, I
around?
was always interested. Like,
Sure.
I've always been interested in understanding how things work.
Right.
And I apply that principle to pretty much everything. It's just, how do things work? How does a computer work? I remember we got like a state-of-the-art like machine like in 1995 or something, and I was like, oh, how does this work? And I took it apart, every single piece out of, it's one of those like desktops, and took every single module out of the machine, and I was like, okay, this is that. Here's the motherboard. Here's some RAM. Here's a hard drive. and I put it back together, and it didn't turn on. This is a brand new, machine that my parents spent a lot of money on.
Right.
I was like, okay, great. Now I get to fix it.
Right.
Now I get to understand why it doesn't work. And so it's a lot of like learn by doing. But because of my dad's job, we had internet very early on. We had access to, I had access to his T1 line at his office.
Nice.
Back when that really mattered.
Yeah.
and it was really amazing. So I was always experimenting with all kinds of stuff to kind of figure it out. So I had a website. My email address, my personal email address is at my last name.net.
Nice.
And I've had that since I was, I don't know, in 5th grade or something.
That's awesome.
And I've been running it. That's been my email address. It still is to this day. I've had a website with all kinds of whatever my interests were. Back in the day, it was about how to pirate, music, which we all went through that. Right. But I was like deep into IRC and news groups, and
sure.
So it was really interesting. But I learned different aspects of technology at different points. It wasn't until the Naval Academy that I got into like formal development, training, right. And at that point, I realized it wasn't for me.
Okay, so you were quite happy to learn how stuff worked in your own way, but sort of going back to your lack of desire to fit in, as soon as it was a more formal way of learning about it, you turned off and said, this isn't for me.
In a way, it was more about, this is not what I want to be doing 40 hours a week.
Okay, fair enough.
Right? I love coding. I love making things. I love the immediacy of it. You can see if something works, if it doesn't work. But as a career path, I knew it wasn't necessarily what I wanted to do. Okay. And I wanted to be more people focused with technology at the same time.
All right.
Yeah.
So you finished your internship. You've now done this Palm Pilot learning app, which has, I think you said, moderate success, which is great. What happens next? What are you looking for? And what do you hope to do at this point?
At that point, I decided to not let school get in the way of my education.
Okay.
And so
classic line.
There you go. Yeah. And I lifted it from my dad, actually.
Nice.
But he's like, don't let school get in the way of your education. And I said, I want to learn, and I'm just going to embrace new things. So I actually began backpacking. And so I went backpacking through Europe. I went backpacking through Asia, through the Middle East, Central America, a whole bunch of places. But in this time, I actually started really focusing on languages. Okay. Because of the whole learning, app. And it was really interesting to be able to say, okay, I'm going to, in 2004, after the tsunami in Southeast Asia, I wanted to go out there and volunteer to, doing construction, building reef cleanup, all kinds of stuff. So I went out there, and it was really interesting to be able to take some of the prior knowledge from like the learning app and apply it to learn languages. So I actually learned Thai fairly well.
Nice.
When I was in Japan, I learned Japanese like fairly well. Not conversational by any stretch of imagination, but it was a way I was approaching problems like, okay, I'm going to be in this country for X period of time. How can I learn the language in a semi-meaningful way in the shortest amount of time? Okay. So I was like, how do you hack that? And so I started, looking up, okay, well, what are the 100 most commonly used words, and can I memorize all of those? How fast can I memorize those? Can I string together, basic sentences based on those words, or, contextual clues in languages?
Yeah, that's great. I love languages, so I'm quite happy to get all of the language hacks that you could possibly deliver. So I'm going to Japan next month, and so part of that has been studying some Japanese during my not as copious as I would like it to be free time. So yeah, I definitely think that when you go to a place, being able to speak the language, even if it's at a sort of rudimentary level, really adds, at least to my enjoyment of it. So
Yeah.
that's great. And then how long did you backpack for? Because you said you're going throughout Europe and Asia.
Yeah. It would be that period was probably about 5 years.
5 years.
That I just took off from school to just learn and travel and I did all kinds of stuff. I was living in Venice Beach at the time in like this tiny studio apartment, 1 block from the beach, and it was
Nice.
pretty nice place for
Sounds pretty nice.
for a bachelor especially.
Yeah.
And then I had it in my mind that I wanted to become a dog owner, and I wanted to get a dog. And
Okay.
I wanted to I was big into training. I've always been like very physical, very active. And being on the beach, I was running on the beach every single day. It was kind of great. And I wanted to get a dog to have like a training buddy.
Right.
And so I was on Craigslist searching for, and I was like, I'm gonna adopt because I'm not gonna pay for
You want a free dog.
breed. I want a free dog.
Yeah.
I want to save a life. I want to do some good.
Yeah.
And then I'm searching Craigslist, and I in the pets section, and I saw this ad for it. The headline was "Don't own a dog, live on a boat," and I was like, huh.
Don't own a dog, live on a boat.
Live on a sailboat.
Live on a sailboat. Okay.
Live on a sailboat to be clear. And I was like, wow. Now, had I not gone to the Naval Academy and learned how to sail there, I probably would have just skipped this ad, but I knew how to sail.
Right.
I love sailing from my time from my 2 years at the academy. And I was like, okay, I'm the kind of person who likes to run the numbers. I was like, this is what I'm like. I could buy a boat for, let's just say $5,000, and then I can pay the slip fee, and then here are the bills, and so I ran the numbers, and it checked out.
Right.
And so I have a really close relationship with my family, with both my mom and my dad. And so I called them up, and I said, I have this crazy idea. I think I want to get rid of my studio apartment, which was amazing.
Yeah.
And I think I want to buy a boat and live on it. And my parents laughed.
I mean,
And then
that's fair, right?
I was 22,
Yeah.
something like that. And my dad, I remember distinctly, my dad said, I think it's a terrible idea, but you should do it. And then I was like,
Your dad sounds cool.
I was like, okay. I'm like, and my dad's kind of like, my mom is a little more practical, but she liked it because the numbers checked out.
Right.
And so literally a week later, I bought a boat and moved on to it from my studio apartment. And so I was living in Marina del Rey
Okay.
on I think it was like a 27-foot sailboat.
Yeah.
Right there.
Yeah. That's awesome. It's funny because this is a funny coincidence. I had a friend named Aaron who lived on a 27-foot sailboat here in Santa Cruz Harbor. So I know exactly what that's like. I know exactly the size. And yeah, he did that for a couple of years and he loved it. He thought it was amazing.
The first vehicle that I ever purchased with the DMV, that I had to register with the DMV, was a boat.
That's so
I had a
awesome.
boat before I had a car.
Yeah.
And back then, we talked before, I had long hair. I'm living on the beach.
Right.
Getting around by longboard, skateboard.
Yeah.
And then I had my boat.
That's
And it was great
incredible.
for somebody who was kind of, broke, but saving, everything that I would just work and save up as much as I could. And then I'd take off traveling, and my monthly fee for that was, I think it was $125 a month that I was paying.
Yeah.
And that came with internet.
Right.
And I had a private bathroom as part of this yacht club, which was amazing. We'd go out on like regattas every now and then.
Nice.
It was a lot of fun, a good time.
Nice. And how long did you live on that boat?
I was on that boat for about 2 years.
2 years.
Probably a little more than that.
Okay.
But at the same time, I started, as I was sailing is great because it's free.
Right.
I had always wanted to fly. Like,
Okay.
That was just like the thing that I wanted to do. That was actually one of the reasons why I went to the Naval Academy. It was because I wanted to fly.
Okay.
And so I said, okay, let's just, learn to fly. So I started taking flying lessons out of Santa Monica Airport.
Okay.
And that ended up being pretty expensive. So
Yeah.
had to sell the boat to kind of pay for that. But I started flying, and that was a lot of fun. And unfortunately, I never finished my private pilot certificate, but I got pretty far.
Okay. And so you were flying, you said you lived there for a couple of years and you were saving and traveling. So was that 2 years you lived on the boat, the last 2 years of your 5 years of travel? Is that roughly
Yes.
the same time?
That's right. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So was it at the end of your travel time that you started learning how to fly?
It was close to really what would happen is I'd come back, I'd save up as much money in a 3 month period,
Sure.
6 month period, and then I just take off until I ran out of money, and then
Right.
came back and started all over again.
Right.
And so that whole idea of starting from scratch is actually pretty comfortable to me
Okay.
these days. But yeah, that's what happened. But I met my now wife,
Okay.
and that kind of put the kibosh on a lot of the things that I was doing, and made me really want to clean up my act
Right.
and get my life together. So
All right. So she wasn't interested in living on a 27-foot sailboat for the long term?
yeah, no, probably not.
Probably not. Okay. Okay. Fair enough. And what sorts of work are you doing? Because I know you said you work for 3 or 6 months or whatever, try to save up. What are you doing to support yourself? I know a boat's cheap, but it's not free. So.
Yeah, I was, working in restaurants at the time, actually.
Okay.
I did some bartending. I was also doing some like tech consulting. I was doing some blogging, some writing. This is like at the time of the age of blogs, so I was like a product reviewer for some like online publications. I was doing a little of everything.
Okay. A little of everything. And then, so you meet your now wife, you sell the boat, you're taking flying lessons, you're trying to clean up your act. Now, what are you doing? Are you still living in the same area, or do you move?
Yeah, at that point, I went back to school to finish out school.
Okay. Where did you go?
I ended up moving up here to San Jose State, and I finished out school at San Jose State.
Nice.
And really, I just knew that, the pull to kind of the Bay Area was there. And so I knew I was going to end up here.
Really?
For kind of tech and that kind of tech companies, that kind of pull.
Okay, that's interesting. When did you start to feel like you were going to end up here?
I think I kind of always felt it.
Okay.
Like, growing up, my dad would fly out to like San Francisco all the time. He was covering, companies. He was the managing editor of Windows magazine, and so he'd come out here to meet with people like the names of my youth, like Jeff Hawkins, like the founder of Palm.
Right.
And then I would hear about stories about Apple and like all these founders in the valley, in Silicon Valley, and so it was always this, like mythical place that I really wanted to be there to see where the garage where HP was like founded.
Right.
And I knew all those stories. I read all the books, it was kind of this place that I just knew I always wanted to be. It was like, it seemed exciting. It seemed the kind of place that I could really fit in, as where, you know, it blending kind of my experiences, blending, you know, these people were people who thought outside the box, and that really kind of always created a pull for me.
Okay. So then you moved up to the Bay, and is this where Chatterbox starts to come in, or are we not there yet?
Oh, no, no.
Not even close.
No,
Okay.
no, this was, I don't know, this is probably 14 years ago or something like that.
Okay.
I moved up to the Bay, finished up school as fast as I could possibly do it. I was studying computer science, political science.
Okay.
And then after graduation, I actually went traveling one last time.
Okay. Old habits die hard.
Yeah, you know,
Okay.
during that time, I was really, at one point I said, I want to maybe work for the government somehow.
Okay.
You know, I went to Egypt. I studied Arabic in Egypt and was there
Okay.
for a while. Then I went to Turkey. I still had the traveling bug.
Sure.
But once I graduated, I you know, went traveling one last hurrah to Turkey, which was a great trip.
Okay.
Came back, and then you know, through kind of family connections and stuff, knew some people who were starting a company,
Okay.
and they were looking for somebody who was really into learning, really kind of had a lot of experiences in different types of in different types of areas. And so they reached out, had some conversations, and ended up being part of the founding team of a company called Tinker.
Tinker.
Tinker,
Okay.
yeah. And this was probably 2012, 2013. And it's a 3 founder team, and there were actually 4 founders at the time. They
Okay.
booted one out,
Okay.
and then they're like, "Oh, we got this guy who can really be our workhorse."
Okay.
But the idea was like, you know, it was about, you know, 10 plus years after, probably 15 years after Google was founded. So I guess
Okay.
Google was founded in 99, 2000, around
Yeah.
there. And so at this point, all the early employees of Google were now having kids.
Right.
And they identified this opportunity where, okay, you have all these engineers who are like, Google's this massive company doing all kinds of, this is Google in their prime,
Right.
not the Google of today.
Ooh. Throwing shade at Google. You love to see it.
But they were all like procreating at this point.
Right.
And they all had kids, and they were interested in like getting their kids interested in computer science. But these were kids from the, you know, from the iPhone generation, from like the touch generation. Not quite iPad, because it was just a couple years after iPad.
Yeah.
But their parents really were interested in getting them into technology. And so the idea was like, how do we teach kids how to code in a fun way? And so this is kind of where I was the liaison for, you know, kids.
Right.
Because I was younger. I was, you know, liked working with kids. I taught martial arts growing up, and and I actually taught a lot of kids, and have had a lot of experience with kids. And so the first challenge was, how do we teach kids how to code? So then that's what I was kind of working on. And so I embedded myself in Palo Alto schools.
Okay.
And started just trying stuff. And at the time, there was no company out there that was actually teaching kids how to code or trying to. The only company that was doing something kind of similar was actually not really a company, but a project out of MIT called Scratch.
Yes.
And it was about like visual blocks, but the whole, like, you know, Mitch Resnick is the leader of that, and the entire idea behind that is that was like unstructured creativity. It was really art.
Right.
You know, how can you, it's like turtle graphics, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And so with my students in a whole bunch of schools across, you know, Palo Alto, I started trying different things. We had like a basic platform with like, it was block based as well. We loved that, but we said, you know what, how about we get kids on a path to learning actual skills.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, I've always felt that kids just want to be able to do things.
Right.
That's pretty much it.
Right.
They want skills.
Right.
And so I was in there, you know, iterating like super quickly with the team. And we finally, it wasn't even, I wish it was my idea, but it was actually one of my students in 3rd grade at Walter Hayes Elementary in Palo Alto, that said he was this really smart kid, and he was trying to teach his classmates
Mm-hmm.
how to make it was this animation where he had the earth in the middle and he wanted the moon to go around the earth.
Okay.
And he took the code for it and just mixed it up.
Mm-hmm.
And then he went to his classmates, here, go see if you can make it work. And so then they had to, it was like a visual puzzle.
Yeah.
And they had to put it together in the right sequence to actually complete the animation. And I saw that and I was like, this is it. I'm like,
That's
this
really
is
interesting.
absolutely it.
Okay.
And then that actually became the cornerstone of teaching kids how to code. At around the same time, there were like other initiatives like code.org.
Mm-hmm.
It's a nonprofit backed by all the big companies. And they started using puzzles to teach kids how to code. And then now if you look across the whole like ed tech sector, it's all puzzles to teach kids how to code.
Right.
It's like these little coding challenges, and it was like pretty interesting. But for me, it saw like, wow, if you can take something that's inherently abstract and just make it very very simple for kids, very simple for any audience,
Mm-hmm.
you know, you can get people to do some pretty amazing things.
Okay. That's so funny for a couple of reasons. One, I was using Scratch when it came out because my dad has been in software for a long time. He wasn't a founder of Google, unfortunately, but yeah, so that was kind of a fun trip through memory lane hearing you talk about that. And yeah, I mean, even some of the coding that I do for fun while I learn is using these puzzles. So I can really see that influence that you're talking about is very obvious in my daily life. So that's really cool. How long were you at Tinker?
I was there 4 years.
4 years.
Yeah.
Okay.
4 years. I was in charge of education,
Mm-hmm.
and built the education arm of the company. It was split to consumer and education.
Okay.
I led education, built that up to about 35,000 schools by the time I left across the country. And yeah, it was quite the trip. I learned a lot. I learned so much from the guys from the founders, just like being, you know, from the early days of meeting in a Starbucks to, you know, switching offices, raising rounds, like all of that stuff. It was quite the learning experience.
I bet.
In 4 years.
Yeah. And what made you decide to leave?
I like to do new things.
Okay. That's totally fair. So do I. Totally a legitimate reason.
You know, I love early stage.
Okay.
Just because you do a little of everything. I had my hand in product. I was like building curriculum. I was working with schools. I was doing trainings. I was doing, you know, I was a sales and marketing team. Like it was, I was doing a little of everything.
Right.
And I really liked that. And it was great. But at the end of the day, I saw that a whole bunch of kids are just like looking at a screen all day. And I'm like, that's not what I was doing when I was, you know, super young. And I wanted to kind of get new experiences. And at the time, I had a friend who reached out, and he was starting a company. And this is around the time of the Raspberry Pi 3. It just come out, the 3B.
Right.
And so he was launching a company of like a DIY computer, where they 3D printed kind of the case, and they give all the parts to kids, and they actually had to go in there and build a computer from like a blueprint.
Right.
And he was getting ready to raise, asked me to, jump on board and build out like a education arm, because you really saw schools as like one of the like viable, just a really good source of revenue for them.
Sure.
And so he wanted me to recreate what I did at Tinker, just for a physical computing company.
Right.
And so I did that.
Okay.
And so I went there, and that was actually my first, not my first actually, my second really experience around like lasers.
Okay.
And so there we were kind of teaching kids about electronics and circuits through Minecraft.
Okay.
And so I was brought on as a VP of product to just build a whole bunch of educational experiences for kids. So we had like a hardware roadmap of all these like little, the Piper Computer Kit would be like the core experience, and then we'd have all these satellite experiences.
Okay.
Outside of that, we teach kids how to code through Minecraft. And we created a whole bunch of really amazing things there.
Okay. And what was the name of that company again?
That was Piper.
Piper.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And okay, so you said that was your second laser experience. Before we move on, I want to hear about what was your first experience?
My first
lasers?
experience was getting engaged.
Oh, okay.
My wife, we got engaged, and my wife, we really wanted to create kind of a very homebrew wedding.
Okay.
And so we got married in Sonoma at my parents' house. They had like a
Nice.
vineyard and like olive orchard and stuff. But
Yeah.
we decided to. I'm really cheap. I was like
Frugal.
frugal. Okay. And we decided, let's do everything. Like let's make it like homemade. Like we're really big into cooking. We enjoy good food, healthy food, and so like, we had this bright idea of just like saving money and doing it ourselves.
Yeah.
So, instead of going out there and buying all this beer for, our friends and family to drink, she's like, why don't you just make the beer? And so
Your wife sounds cool too.
so then I learned how to brew beer, and I brewed 50 gallons of beer for the wedding, bottled. And it was
Wow.
nightmare, but it was so much fun. But I love learning, and I had to do some quality testing.
Of course.
Drank the first 5 gallons.
You need to make sure it's safe.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But ended up brewing 4 styles of beer for the wedding. And then my wife, my parents are like investors in a winery in Berkeley.
Mm-hmm.
And my wife at the time was like volunteering just to learn about winemaking and stuff.
Sure.
And so she actually stomped the grapes
Oh, nice.
that of the wine that we served at our wedding.
Nice.
Which was like really great. But then getting back to lasers.
Right. Sorry. I was so engrossed. I was like, yes, tell me everything. Right. The lasers.
But getting back to lasers, she's like, okay, well, the save the date were these little wooden magnets with like engraved stuff in there.
Right.
And so I, signed up for Tech Shop.
Okay.
And learned, all about lasers there. And I made all the save the dates that we sent out to all of our friends,
Yeah.
which were these like little refrigerator magnets.
Okay.
And
That's
then,
awesome.
And then, the wine glasses at the wedding were engraved with, her name is not, my wife's name is Nadia.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was hashtag Kevin Nadia. And we engraved
Nice.
everything onto all the wine glasses, and everybody got to, take their wine glasses like home with them.
Wow, that's amazing.
And so that was my first foray into lasers.
Okay.
And then a couple years later, I got back into lasers
Right.
because of
Piper.
Piper. Yeah.
Okay. So you're brought in at Piper to do basically round 2 electric boogaloo of what you did at Tinker,
Yeah.
right? Build out this education arm. how long were you there? Were you successful at it, or did you
Yeah,
like it as much?
we grew really fast and
Hmm.
built up that education program, except for the fact that I was there probably a little over a year.
Okay,
During that process, I became a dad,
nice.
and
That changes some
that
things.
changes some things. That
Yeah,
changes some things. It really does. And so prior to that, I was early adopter on all technology. I was like, I
sure.
loved it. More technology, the better.
Right.
It was great. I had I had electric door locks before
Hmm.
anybody had them.
Right.
And my wife would call me up and be like, "Can you unlock the door, please?" Because I took her key away from her
Right.
because I forced her to use the Bluetooth, and this was back, this Lockatron. It was like one of the
Yeah.
early Kickstarter success stories that
Yeah.
utterly failed.
Yeah.
And so I was a glass hole, I had Google Glass, and I actually wanted to wear it during my wedding to have
That's
to
so
record my
great.
wife coming in, walking down the
Amazing.
aisle, but she wouldn't let me. She put the kibosh on that.
Fair enough.
But our engagement pictures, I have Google
You've
Glass
got
the
them.
entire time. Yeah,
That's so
in,
great.
in every shot.
Yeah.
But becoming a dad changes you.
Sure.
And at this point, I was seeing, social media was kind of taking over. It's the heyday of social media,
Right.
Instagram, Twitter, um, and it just wasn't for me. And I
Right.
never liked social media. Um, what I loved about technology is how it allowed the best technology, the technology that kind of gets out of the way,
Right.
and and so when it came to my daughter who was born, I was like, we got to do this differently. It's technology is becoming this thing. It's like more technology is just better. It was the public consensus, and I was like, no. It's like, what are screens doing to all these people? We would go out to restaurants, and I see everybody just focused on the phone
Right.
all the time, and it just kind of rubbed me the wrong way because I'm a people person. I like people,
Right.
and what I see is that social media, which was designed to keep us more connected,
Hmm.
was actually doing the opposite.
Right.
And so I said, well, we're not going to do any technology with my daughter. Nothing.
Wow. Okay.
No TV, nothing.
Okay.
And then I quickly realized that's just not doable. And then so at this point I was like, well, there has to be the right kind of technology and the right kind of, but what is that? And so I had this idea of kind of like socially conscious technology, like technology with a mission. I was playing with a whole bunch of ideas there. And then this was around the time that smart speakers were being, like, Alexa came out,
Right.
kind of awesome. My daughter's name is Alexandra, so
Okay.
it could be Alexa for sure. I don't know if that,
Right.
had some impact on that, but really, I thought it was this really amazing technology. Since the beginning of technology, it's like computers worked really hard to allow us to use them, right? And then the mouse came out, and then that was just like a way. We have a file system, we have a desktop, like,
Oh, yeah.
and all these things. But now you don't need to know how to use computers, you just need to be able to talk.
Right.
And I thought that was really amazing. I saw, like, my granddad at the time, I was having a conversation with him. He's like, what was the name of that actor who starred in this, like, movie that came out in, like, 1937?
Right.
I'm like, I have no idea. And he's like, well, too bad.
Yeah.
And I was like, I had a watch, and I was like, who is the actor who is in this movie? And it came up with the answer. And then he did it. And then I was like, wow, like, voice technology is actually really amazing. It's democratizing.
Yeah.
You don't have to learn how to use it. You just speak.
Right.
And so I thought, that's great, except for the fact that Amazon owns Alexa,
Right.
Google owns Google Assistant,
Sure.
and the whole goal for those two devices is data harvesting.
Sure.
And then, I'm pretty private. I don't share like, you know, information out there. And so I was like, it's terrible that all these kids are using these devices. I'm still talking to schools, and teachers are like, yeah, these devices are amazing. Any kid can do it.
Right.
Until you read the stories about like shadow profiles and how, you know, teachers are saying, sending kids home with permission slips for their parents to just say, yes, I can use this in my classroom.
Yeah.
And I'm just going to turn on like voice print, which these companies are still harvesting data because that's what you do.
Yeah.
And so I was like, what if we had something like that without the data,
Right.
that kids would build, you know, playing on the whole idea of like Piper, where they build something
Right.
to learn how technology works.
Okay.
And then also, what if they actually had to teach it? Right?
If the kids had to teach it.
Kids had to teach it.
Okay.
The coding from Tinker. So I was kind of marrying the idea of like learning how to code from Tinker days to learning how to build a device from Piper days.
Right.
To it's private, it's safe, it's everything, all the things that as a new dad I wanted for my daughter.
Right.
And so I got to work on that.
Okay.
And that is really the genesis of Chatterbox.
Okay. Very cool. How long was it from, let's say, from the time that you became a dad and started having these concerns to when Chatterbox as an idea was really formed? Was this like over the course of a crazy afternoon, or was that a couple
Probably
weeks?
about 2 years.
About
actually.
2 years.
2 years, yeah.
Okay.
There was a lot of kind of soul searching, a lot of like experimentation and all kinds of stuff. Yeah, probably about 2 years. We launched our Kickstarter for Chatterbox in, I want to say, May of 2019.
Okay.
And at that point, I'd probably been working on the project for about 6 months. And we had this just crazy idea of like, okay, well, it's a smart speaker that kids are going to build and then they're going to teach it. And yeah, we had the basic concept there.
Okay.
But we're still figuring it out as we're
Sure.
doing it.
Yeah, I imagine you've had several dozen revisions by now.
Yeah.
How was the Kickstarter? Was it pretty successful? Did it let you launch?
It did. The Kickstarter was actually pretty successful. And like the goal was, can we find 100 people to spend $100?
Right.
And we ended up, I think we were over 600% funded.
Nice.
And so that was actually pretty interesting. That was really just a test. Do people want this? That was the answer that I was trying to answer that question.
Okay. So you have this great Kickstarter. You've been working on it for 6 months. Does Chatterbox look like this yet? Is it anything yet, or what?
It had legs
next?
at the time.
It had legs.
It had legs.
Okay.
It was way more. It was a way more fancy design than it is right here. But we, through like testing with kids and in schools, we quickly found out that the legs would just keep on falling off.
Yeah.
It was a lot of things. It's initially I was like, well, it'd be nice if it was wood.
Right.
But wood is expensive.
Sure.
And so at the time, I don't know if you remember Nintendo Labo.
I don't remember.
It was like the Nintendo Switch had this like cardboard based extension type thing where you can actually make stuff. You can make like a fishing pole, and it's just like an extension made by Nintendo. And I was like, this is the coolest thing ever.
Right.
Google actually had this really cool project called Google AIY, which was like build your own smart speaker with Google Assistant and everything.
Okay.
Using a Raspberry Pi. And so I saw that, I was like, that's kind of cool, but I don't want to use Google Assistant.
Right.
Because it's just, we're back to square A.
Yeah.
Square one. And then the Nintendo Labo was so cool because of the creativity. And I was like, okay, let's use cardboard. And so I went through searching all kinds of like cardboard suppliers, chipboard, all kinds of things. It was cheaper. It's also which meant that we didn't have to like pass on the expense of that to like to customers.
Right.
It's also something that kids can paint on.
Right.
And so we've had kids who turn theirs into like Grogu, the
Right.
Baby Yoda,
Yeah.
or like Spider-Man, or like whatever. They can make it their own.
Right.
And that's the whole idea, where we wanted kids to kind of take charge of their own learning.
Okay.
And so it ended up being like kind of great to use cardboard, because especially for schools as well,
Right.
because it's more of a consumable. Every
Sure.
single student can go through and like build it because it's cheap enough.
Right. And so at this point, you've done your Kickstarter May of 2019. It does well. Where are you producing these early Chatterboxes?
At the time, I was a member of the Hacker Dojo in it was they were located in Sunnyvale at the time.
Okay.
And Hacker Dojo is this great nonprofit. They provide they had a laser, they had an entire electronics section, because we actually created a circuit board, a hat for the Raspberry Pi.
Oh, okay.
And then it was a community of people who wanted to help each other and prop each other up and share ideas, and it was really amazing.
Yeah.
And so I was working out of there, and I would use the laser for the many hours that I needed to use the laser to cut all the cardboard,
Right.
to ship our Kickstarter. And so I'd be there from 11 o'clock at night until 8 o'clock in the morning, just like cutting nonstop, and it was really a wonderful experience. Like we wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for
Right.
Hacker Dojo.
Right. And are you mostly only using the laser at this point in terms of tools?
Just the laser for the case.
For the actual case?
Yeah,
Okay.
for the case, and that's it.
Okay. And how long are you in that kind of early stage where you're sort of figuring things out? You're still at Hacker Dojo.
So the Kickstarter closed in July.
Okay, so it's 2 months.
And our release date was by Christmas.
Okay, so that's quick.
So we actually successfully shipped everything by Christmas. But as soon as the Kickstarter closed, I had to place orders. Unfortunately, Raspberry Pis were a shortage. There was a Raspberry Pi shortage, so
Right.
had to, work some magic to find all of those, and then start cutting. The software wasn't ready. Like nothing was ready at all.
Right.
But we somehow
Okay.
got it done. Yeah.
That's awesome. Now, I hate to be that guy, but for the clever listener, they'll notice that this is just heading into New Year's 2020. And I always hate that in everything that I experience now, everyone always talks about, but what happened with COVID?
The blip.
Because I'm tired of hearing about it. But we can't ignore it. So
Yeah.
we go into the beginning of 2020.
Yeah.
What happens to you around the beginning of March? How do things change?
Yeah, so my background is education,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like I'm not really all that familiar with like a consumer, with a consumer product.
Right.
Like I'm also impact driven. Like I like education because I think learning and education is the greatest thing, and I always want to make it fun
Right.
and interesting for kids. And so the Kickstarter was just a way to get our initial product off the ground.
Right.
And then that was, we were getting ready to do a second run and launch at Q, which is a conference here in Palm Springs.
Okay.
And I'd launched like other companies there previously, and it was always like a good place because it's California schools, technology oriented, like educators.
Right.
And so we were getting ready, and I was getting ready to place all my orders. And I'm hearing these rumblings in China.
Sure.
And this is January,
Yeah.
where I'm hearing all this stuff, and I'm like, okay, something's happening. I was also thinking about, because I didn't want to be cutting cardboard or managing any of that stuff.
Right.
Working with like a contract manufacturer in like Mexico at the time. And so I had some conversations going there as well. But there's all this stuff going on. So I just said, let's wait. And
it's a good call.
And so I was just a little patient. We didn't have that much of a runway at that point. And I was coming back from Mexico City to launch Chatterbox at the Q Education Conference. And the day that we arrived, I want to say this was like March 17th, 2020,
Okay.
March 16th, something like that.
Right.
Was the day California went into lockdown.
Yeah.
I had already paid for the booth. I had already spent all the money on marketing material for the conference. And then they said, they canceled the conference.
Yeah.
Of course. But then they said, no, we're going to, put on a virtual conference.
Right.
And I said, that's going to be great for a physical product that you have to put your hands on.
Yeah.
And so needless to say, it didn't work.
Of course.
But at that point, it was just, what I was experiencing, what everybody else was experiencing, which was, what am I going to do?
Right.
And so it was pretty much, a bit of hibernation for, probably a month or two.
Okay.
A little bit of despair mixed in there.
I think everybody watching is familiar.
Yeah. And then I just said, what, we're going to have to work our way out of this.
Right.
So, yeah, so we, heads down, we started kind of cleaning up the platform, cleaning up some bugs, working on the education material, new stuff, new features. Yeah.
Okay. And you're saying at this point, so what does the team or the company look like at this point?
The company, I had help from, it was really like a family effort.
Okay.
My cousin in Portland, he's a hardware computer engineer.
Okay.
And so he helped with like the board. I have another cousin in Santa Barbara who's like great with art. She actually designed our logo.
Oh, okay.
And all kinds of stuff. If you see our website, it's better fidelity there
than on the small cardboard box.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then my wife was helping out as well. So, and then I had a developer based out of Europe. I was doing some development as well. So it was small. It was tiny, but really it's just the core team was me and the developer.
The one in Europe.
Yeah, in Europe.
Okay. And at what point? So you've done your 2 months of despair. You're getting back to it. At what point do you start coming to do your manufacturing at IFL instead of at Hacker?
So it's probably about a year later.
About a year later.
About a year later. Yeah, we decided, okay, I started teaching classes like remotely.
Okay.
Where I'd Zoom with like students.
Sure.
And, we're trying to really drive like online sales. We had a good Q4 actually.
Okay.
Which, extended that runway a little bit more.
Sure.
But at that point, we're pretty much out of product.
Right.
And so I'm putting out feelers, and I've worked with a lot of schools across the country and a lot of different organizations. And there's an organization based out of Indiana that was putting on their state conference.
Okay.
And so I was talking to them, and what they do is they actually like to have a conference tool, kind of like Google I/O, where they used to give out, something to all like conference attendees.
Oh yeah.
So they had that kind of model.
Okay.
And they worked with all of the schools, pretty much every single school in the state of Indiana. And, keep in mind, we've been talking about AI for a long time, and smart speakers and all of that stuff. And they said that this is great. A lot of their educators are asking about AI and smart speakers. And so they reached out and requested like a proposal. So I put together a proposal. We're going up against Amazon. We're going against I think Sony had something. It was a lot of big companies, and we're this like tiny little company operating out of my garage,
Right.
In true Silicon Valley style.
I was gonna say, in 10 years, someone's gonna be like, this is where Chatterbox started.
Yeah, and so they said, well, does this, what grades does this work for? And I said, well, we really designed for like third grade, so like elementary school. But we have middle schools using us. We're using some high schools at this time. These are like early backers of the Kickstarter. During the pandemic, we actually had a university master's program that decided to use us. It was a class on human-computer interaction, which was like pretty interesting.
Yeah.
And so I put together a proposal, and they said, great, well, we want to go with you guys. So
amazing.
They pretty much placed a massive order. And then the question was like, can you guys build it? I was like, yeah, we could absolutely. I'm like, actually, let me check with my Raspberry Pi supplier first. And so I went there, and they said, yes, we could do it.
Yeah.
And then I was like, great. Now I need to order cardboard. I need to get everything going. But Hacker Dojo actually shut down during the pandemic.
Gotcha. Yeah.
And so I was like, do I buy a laser and run it out of my garage and do this? Or, and so I started searching around, and I went to a couple places up in Oakland, in San Francisco. I was looking for a place, and then IFL, Idea Fab Labs, was on that list. And so I'd gone up to Oakland, and the place was like okay, except the traffic was just awful.
Oh yeah.
And then driving back was just like, I was in 2.5 hours of traffic, but it was 2.5 hours to get back to my house in Campbell.
Yeah.
But I was supposed to go over the hill to Santa Cruz, and I was like, oh my God, I'm not going to go.
Yeah.
And then I called my wife, and then she's like, just go, just go, because there's an orientation meeting.
Sure.
So
on Monday nights.
Monday nights, exactly. Yeah. And so I was like, I'm going to go. And I just drove, and I probably ran out of podcasts. It was one of those.
Of those days.
Oh my God, it was terrible. But then I came over here, and I've always loved Santa Cruz, like the ocean. I love the ocean. I love surfing, and it just reminds me of like my days like coming out here to surf. And I got over the hill, felt energized with like that fresh like ocean air, and then got here, and I was like, wow, this is a really cool space.
Oh.
And I met Jordan and told him like what I'm working on. He's like, listen, we're down for anything. We want you to be here. And he had just such a can-do attitude.
Yeah.
Whereas, the conversation I had earlier that day, we're like, well, maybe we can fit you in, and, maybe you can do this, or all these rules. And Jordan was like, let's just do this.
Yeah.
Like, this is going to be fun.
Yeah.
And I was like, I'm sold. I'm like, okay.
There you go.
And so I signed up, and I was like, I was still ready, to save money. I was going to do everything, myself. Do my 3 or 4 hours of sleep a night, and just like burn everything.
Brutal, yeah.
And then Jordan was like, we can do this for you. And I was like, you know what? Okay.
Yeah.
And then, really fortunate to have found Idea Fab Labs, and Jordan and the guys just ended up cutting all of our cardboard, for us.
Yeah. And how many units was it that you needed to produce for this conference?
It was over 1,000.
Over 1,000.
Yeah, over 1,000 units, which for us it was a lot. That's and also in a really short amount of time. We got greenlit at the end of June, and everything had to be ready by October.
Yeah,
so
that would be a lot to do by yourself?
It was
Couple months.
Yeah, it was a lot of work. It was a lot of work. And to make matters worse, it was September 9th when my Raspberry Pi order was supposed to arrive.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a lot of money up front for that Raspberry Pi order. And
Yeah.
the Raspberry Pis never arrived.
They never arrived.
They never arrived. Yes. My supplier, both of them, DigiKey and Newark, both just canceled all the orders last minute.
Wow.
And so that threw an entire monkey wrench on a smart speaker that is based on a Raspberry Pi.
Yeah.
Doesn't really do much without the Raspberry Pi.
Yeah.
So
It's a very cute cardboard box.
it is.
Yeah,
Thanks.
there you
Yeah.
go. Give away 1,000 of those.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
so it was a challenging time.
How did you end up dealing with that?
We had already cut all the inserts for the packaging with the Raspberry Pi slot. So we
Right.
had to recut all of that. So there's added cost there. And also the time. And I had to work with the conference, with all the conference people to just explain that there's no Raspberry Pis. We're not the only ones. It's not on us. I'm sorry. And so we gave everybody the kits without the Raspberry Pi, and we mailed that.
Oh, you
And
mailed the Raspberry Pi later. Okay.
We had to eat the cost.
Yeah, that's
But I actually
tough.
I never received that Raspberry Pi order until the following year.
You got it the following year.
I got it the following year. They said, we still have you on. But I got it in March of the following year. And the Raspberry Pis that I actually secured was from a friend's company who also makes a product based on Raspberry Pi. But they hit extra shortages and
Right.
weren't production ready.
Right.
And needed the cash flow from all the pies that they had. So I
Right.
bought their entire supply off them
Okay.
and then had to send
Wow.
it out. It was a trying time.
Sounds very trying. Okay. I guess that pretty much brings us to present. So if I understand correctly, so right now you're still working to distribute this cute little box that's made by Jordan and the guys here at IFL. And are you doing it mostly through the schools as well, or conferences like
now
this?
we're mostly direct to schools now.
Okay.
Which is nice. And we've had some really great success cases. We're growing pretty fast in Massachusetts,
Okay.
in Florida, Indiana, of course,
Nice.
Texas as well.
Okay.
But we are now, with this whole craze, the world has finally caught up to us,
Right.
preaching the AI gospel.
Right.
And now everybody knows what ChatGPT is.
Yeah.
And we actually we're like very early on had ChatGPT integration in here.
Wow.
So what we allow kids to do is to create skills, voice skills using ChatGPT. So if you're familiar with ChatGPT, it's all about like pre-prompting,
Very familiar. Yes.
prompt engineering, pre-prompting. So now kids are actually creating skills using pre-prompts and practicing that.
Okay.
And really supercharging their education and creating a whole bunch of educational skills, for school.
That's awesome. And so I am not a third grader, but if I wanted to acquire one of these boxes, could I do so from your website?
Yeah, we have online sales through our website, hellochatterbox.com.
Okay. Perfect.
Yeah, and yeah.
Okay. And would you walk me through a small demo? I know that this box isn't plugged in, so it won't do anything, but what all can you do with this Chatterbox?
So this comes flat packed.
Okay.
And the first step is they have to actually assemble it.
Okay.
And I'm going to try to take this apart right here. But you can see it's an introduction to kind of how smart speakers work.
Okay.
This is a microphone board. We tell kids, the microphone is like the ears of the computer.
Right.
The speaker is how it talks. There's a button on there. The button is actually pretty important because Chatterbox only listens when kids push the physical button.
Okay.
Other than that, it's not ever listening.
It's not the
we don't store
ever listening.
Exactly.
Type. Okay.
We don't store any. There is no wake word.
Okay.
And we don't store any transcripts of kids. There's no personally identifiable information, which is really important. Yeah. Making this actually the only smart speaker that can be used in schools. Right. So we kind of own that, ironically. Right. Yeah. And so, but yeah, they put it together. That's probably about a 30-minute experience for kids. Okay. And then they connect it to internet, and then it says, you ask it a question, and it says, I don't know how to do that. Please teach me by going to our website. And so they connect to Chatterbox, and they can actually teach it using kind of Scratch-like skills, if you're familiar with Scratch. Yeah, very familiar. So we use Google Blockly, which is what the Scratch team now uses as well. Yeah. But they're programming through language. So when I hear "What's the weather?" Speak, that's another block, and then we have like APIs as like visual representations of APIs. Yeah. So then, they can, they learn that, if they want to get data, they have to get it from the appropriate source. So we integrate with like Open Weather Map, ChatGPT, of course, Wolfram Alpha, right? All kinds of different sources of information for kids. Okay. I know you said that this is for kids, but this sounds really cool. I think I might have to get one. It's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun, especially, it inspired by my daughter. Mm-hmm. She was the first Chatterbox. The name comes from her as well, because she just loves talking. But it's really amazing to see how she just comes to it. She still only uses it, doesn't actually teach it. Right. But she'll come to me and she's like, Papa, can you teach Chatterbox to do this when I say this? Which is the basic idea behind Chatterbox. Yeah. So that's very cool. Yeah. Well, we're up to the present day. Are there any new and exciting plans for Chatterbox around the corner that you want to talk about? Or... Yeah, we should have a new product coming out. Is it a bigger box? Or... if you can't talk about it, that's fine. Not yet, curious. But probably in about 6 months, we're going to be releasing kind of the next generation of this. Okay. And so it should be pretty exciting. Okay. Be smaller. Smaller than this. It's gonna be smaller, but very exciting. Very okay. Exciting. Yeah. And 6 months. Still early days. Yeah. Okay, I'll make a note. Check in 6 months. Yeah. All right. Well, fantastic. We've been going for like an hour and a half. This has been really, really fun. Do you have any last thoughts, parting words for the people at home? Actually, why don't you tell people where they can find you? I know you said the website, but say that again, and any social medias that you want people to go check out. Yes, website is hellochatterbox.com. Mm-hmm. On social, which Twitter is going to be Hello Chatterbox. Right. That's x.com/chatter. Yeah, on Twitter. Yeah. And Instagram, Hello Chatterbox. Facebook, Hi Chatterbox. Facebook, Hi Chatterbox. Did someone have... Somebody has it. Someone took Hello Chatterbox? And they won't... I've reached out several occasions and can't get anybody to respond to me, so... That's so funny. See. Okay. Yeah. Hello Chatterbox, except on Facebook where it's Hi Chatterbox. Yeah, exactly. Okay. Awesome. Well, thanks very much for being on the show. This has been really fun. And thanks everybody for watching. Hopefully we'll see you next time. Thank you. Thank you for having us.